Etruscan nobility were the founders of Rome and a significant link in the chain of beast empires representing the power of ancient Rome. So I'm going to cover them a bit more. Although the Etruscan reference in occult media is obscured, I can tell references to them are much more than just references to ancient Rome. I think this is likely because the Genesis 6 conspiracy has a root in ancient Rome by way of the Etruscan nobility. They're depicted in artwork with elongated skulls and large serpentine eyes like Akhenaten, so they were Nephilim. It's interesting that those figures look a lot like this depiction of a musician found in ancient Babylon, and they did find jewelry from the Levant in the Etruscan artifacts. They also found an Etruscan linen book used to wrap a mummy found in Egypt. So these are beast empire nobility. After all, the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, had Jesus crucified because he was perceived as a threat to Roman authority. So their religion is not about Jesus. They're worshippers of the mother goddess Isis, Cybele, Astarte, Inanna, Ishtar, Diana, the drag queen of heaven. At the time of Jesus' crucifixion, the Roman Empire governed the region, including Judea. Jesus was arrested and tried by the Sanhedrin, the Jewish religious council, and then brought before Pilate, who ultimately sentenced him to be scourged and crucified. Remember from my last video that it was the Etruscans who passed on the rights of the Roman king's power to scourge and execute. This is what the fasci represents, and it originated with the Etruscans. Let's investigate some further details of the fasci. Fasci also frequently occurs as a charge in royal heraldry. It's an ancient religious and mythological association to the fallen, along with the swastika, which I've covered in prior videos. Fasci is a Latin word for a bundle of wooden rods and an axe. This concept and the symbol originated with the Etruscan nobility, who were the first kings of Rome. The earliest archaeological remains of fasci are those discovered in an acropolis near the Etruscan hamlet, dated around 625 BC, which coincides with Rome's legendary Etruscan king Lucius Tarquinius Pius. Etruscan origins are also supported by ancient literary evidence. Ancient Roman literary sources are unanimous in describing the ancient kings of Rome as being accompanied by 12 lictors carrying fasci, representing the 12 Etruscan city-states representing a military campaign. This practice is ascribed to the first Roman king Romulus, who selected 12 military leaders corresponding to the 12 birds, which appeared in augury at the founding of Rome. And augury was a Greco-Roman religious practice of observing the behavior of birds to receive omens. So the fasci also represents divination at the root. Then it was passed on to the Roman kings and eventually the magistrates, where it symbolized their power to punish and murder subjects. The wooden rods represent the power to scourge, exactly like the Romans did to Jesus, and the axe represents the power to execute, like they did with Jesus. The fasci is still a representation of magisterial power, law, and governance today. Even the U.S., in its present state behind the podium in the U.S. House, and the Senate seal houses the fasci. So if you've ever been misfortunate enough to have gone through anything dealing with the court system, you will feel like you have been scourged. I've been through it, and it's one of the reasons that I do my videos. I believe the idolatrous Etruscan religion, military, and governance practices will be significant to the end-time one-world religion and governance. In Revelation, John refers to the seat of idolatry where the woman sits on 7 hills. Since John's vision was during the time of the Romans, those 7 mountains or hills represent the 7 hills of Rome. I will cover the significance of a few of those hills now. The Capitoline wolf is an Etruscan bronze depicting Romulus and Remus being mothered by a she-wolf or a jackal, just like Damien in the Omen movie franchise. Capitoline Hill was built during the time when Etruscan kings ruled Rome. Romulus, being named as the founder of Rome, was Etruscan. This bronze is currently on display in the Vatican Museum. Palatine Hill was where Cybele, the hermaphrodite mother goddess, drag queen of heaven, was venerated as a prophet giving omens similar to the Oracle of Delphi. I've covered Palatine Hill and Cybele in other videos. Aventine Hill was once home to the temple to the goddess Diana, and this is it. And there's an infamous keyhole from the location of that temple, and this is it. And when you look through that keyhole, when you walk up to the door and peer through the keyhole, you have a view of St. Peter's. And this is significant because Sir James Frazer ends his witchcraft book, The Golden Bough, with the implication that Diana worship was transferred to St. Peter's Basilica from the Temple of Diana at Lake Nemi, where the Roman emperors had their party palaces. Aventine Hill features heavily in Roman mythology of its founding, involving Romulus and Remus also. The twins fought over who would be the founder of the new city via an augury, which is the behavior of birds, the interpreting behavior of birds to interpret omens. Remus set his augury on Aventine Hill and Romulus on Palatine Hill, with both of them claiming to have seen omens that meant they each had won. Romulus and Remus fought, and then Romulus ended up killing Remus and founding Rome, and then the city was named after him. This is a replica of an Etruscan bronze statue of a mermaid or a siren. And there is another replica of an Etruscan called Sleep and Death Carrying Off the Slain Sarpedon. And I thought I had it, but maybe I don't. I can pull that up. That's it. And a Sarpedon was the son of Zeus and Europa. A few points from my prior video regarding the Etruscans. Their proto-Roman culture dated around 1000 BC or earlier. Romulus founded Rome according to Etruscan ritual, with a boundary around Palatine Hill following the Etruscan practice. They follow Nephilim bloodlines, including interbreeding, to keep the dynastic royal lineage intact, with the noble class ruling with heavily influence from the priest class. They worshipped the mother goddess, otherwise known as the drag queen of heaven. They worshipped other fallen angels and pagan gods. They were infamous for divination and omens, and we will see a reference to omens frequently related to the Etruscans, as in the Omen movie franchise. Wolf or jackal symbolism is found in their art and in their necropolis. And Latin was formed from the Etruscan language in part, and Latin is often the language of demons. Now we can look at the obscured but intentional examples of Etruscan references in occult media. First, the Omen franchise, which, if you aren't familiar with these movies, they're all about the rise of the Antichrist, and there are many references in this series of movies to Etruscans, which incorporated their mythology and beliefs. So we'll go through these categories of references. The first is omens and divination. The name, the omen itself, is a reference to Etruscans because the saga focuses heavily on the idea of omens and prophecies. Etruscans were renowned for their practice of divinations, divining omens, especially through the examination of animals' entrails and observing the flight of birds, which aligns with the film's use of cryptic symbols and events leading up to Damien's birth. So the Etruscans were false prophets. In Damien Omen 2, a raven acts as a manifestation of Damien's subconscious or demonic influence. Speaking of the use of birds, the popes held a tradition of releasing doves from the apostolic palace window as a symbol of peace. But in 2014, Pope Francis' doves were attacked by a crow and a seagull, so they switched to balloons. The other form of divination used by the Etruscans was by reading the organs or entrails of animals, especially sheep's liver, to deliver omens, which seems very satanic. Imagine slaughtering a sheep or any other animal and then going through their organs, dissecting them to divine. That's just disgusting witchcraft. This is going to be hard to see, but certain elements in the original Omen movie, like the black dog guarding Damien, can be linked to Etruscan symbolic representations of the supernatural or underworld. In the original Omen movie, Damien's adoptive father and a photographer were led to an ancient Etruscan necropolis by a Jesuit priest to find the remains of a jackal or she-wolf who was the parent of Damien, and this is that gravesite. This is really kind of dark. But during that scene in the movie, the two are attacked by dogs, black dogs, and bitten on the leg. And this is specifically an Etruscan reference because the black dogs are the guardians of the necropolis. In real life, Etruscan frescoes found in an Etruscan necropolis. And the scene in that fresco is a depiction of attack by the dogs, and they are specifically biting the legs of the victim in that fresco. And I covered that in my last video on the Etruscans. The Gorgon. The Gorgon is the official Etruscan symbol, and Gorgons are demonic women with snakes for hair. Damien is depicted in a fresco in Tel Megiddo as a Gorgon in these movies. Tel Megiddo is a significant historical and archaeological site in Israel associated with ancient battles and prophecies, which some believe will be the location of the final battle between good and evil. And in the last Omen movie, released in 2024, titled The First Omen, the main character is a nun who they are attempting to impregnate with the Antichrist. And in more than one scene, they focus on her positioned like a Gorgon, with her hair placed all around to match that depiction of a Gorgon. So that Gorgon is a definite Etruscan reference, maybe the most significant one. Ishtar, or Astarte. Ishtar Wilson is the real-life name of this actress who played the disturbed nun character named as Sister Angelica in the most recent Omen movie released in 2024. Ishtar is Astarte. The Bible refers to Astarte as the Queen of Heaven, a title she inherited from Inanna or Ishtar in Mesopotamia. Bilingual tablets written in Phoenician and Etruscan dedicated to Astarte were found at the temple, or one of the Etruscan temples. Then you have this Black Madonna located at the mountain of Montserrat in Spain in a Benedictine monastery where Romans built a temple to honor the Roman goddess Venus. Legend had it that Benedictine monks could not move the statue to construct their monastery, so they built around it, and now it's a pilgrimage site. Venus is always associated with the mother goddesses. The Jesuit Ignatius of Loyola was inspired by this Black Madonna, and then he went to a cave in nearby Marissa, where he says he received the divine spirit. Cassiopeia. In the Final Conflict Omen movie, Cassiopeia is the star alignment that the priests are watching for the second coming of Jesus and the Antichrist. Cassiopeia is, as a constellation, represents the Queen of Heaven. Vizardelli is the name of the convent, the Jesuit convent that is trying to birth the Antichrist, where that movie takes place. And Vizardelli was a cardinal in real life, I believe in the 19th century, involved with the papacy's efforts to collect and preserve Etruscan artifacts. There's an artifact of a multi-headed Hydra referenced in the second Omen movie. Damien's female demonic guardian in that movie is his stepmother, and she is shown this artifact by an archaeologist who says it is her favorite. in that movie. And here it is, that Hydra with the 3 heads in an ancient Etruscan tomb in real life. And this looks an awful lot like the medieval depictions of the beast ridden by the whore. Now we can look at the Game of Thrones and the Etruscan references in that series, because it draws references to Etruscan culture also. The Citadel, with its library and emphasis on knowledge and rituals, can be seen as having elements of Etruscan religious practices involving priesthood and rituals, such as the fire-based rituals practiced by Melisandre, inspired by Etruscan religious traditions. The Valerian freehold, with its influence on other religions and rich, complex culture, shares similarities with the Etruscans' role as intermediaries between the Mediterranean and the continent. The statue of the dying Gaul in the series, with its representation of a defeated warrior, has a parallel to the Etruscan funerary stelas, which also show a focus on death and the afterlife. The Black Phoenicians and their Black Etruscans are a historical reference suggesting that the Etruscans might have been connected to Phoenician traders. Charles Dance, the actor, who is Order of the British Empire, was the Jesuit priest of the Vizardelli convent in the 2024 Omen movie. He was also Tywin Lannister in Game of Thrones, the patriarch. Tywin is a reference to Tarquin, Etruscan dynasty who ruled Rome. Etruscans are referred to as Tyrrhenians. The Mediterranean Sea is named for the Tyrrhenians, or the Etruscans. The sea on the west coast of Italy is then the Tyrrhenian Sea, which became the Mediterranean. So it's intentional that he played the Jesuit priest at a convent with an Etruscan reference, and that he also played Tywin Lannister in the Game of Thrones. So how can we be sure that the name Tywin is a reference to the Etruscan dynasty? Because Cersei Lannister, the queen character in the Game of Thrones, was the daughter of Tywin Lannister, and according to a poet, Hesiod, I think, Cersei is an historic Etruscan, the granddaughter of Helios, who ruled over the Etruscans. In my first video, I reviewed the fact that the dragon, lion, and bull were found in Etruscan symbols, the same ones on the Ishtar Gate of Babylon, the same ones on the British heraldry today. The unicorn represents the single-horned bull. And the sigil of the Lannisters in Game of Thrones was the roaring lion, rampant, standing on its hind legs, langed, with its tongue sticking out, and crowned. This specific lion is known as the Palatine lion, which originated on Palatine Hill, the Etruscan one. This same lion relates to the preeminent position held by the Prince Elector of the Palatinate, which is the Holy Roman Empire, as an imperial vicar since the Golden Bull of 1356. King's Landing is the seat of the Iron Throne in the series, and the Etruscans were famous for iron. It's how they got rich. And in the Game of Thrones, it was the Iron Throne they were fighting for. King's Landing is based on Rome and its 7 hills. In the show, there is a wall around King's Landing, which represents an ancient Etruscan defensive wall built around Rome and Palatine Hill. In the series, the wall was shot in Croatia, but that's because that Etruscan wall is not still standing today. The House of Dragon series, King's Landing, looks like a combination of the Pantheon and the castles you see in Umbria, where they are high up on a hill with the peasants below. And that would have been exactly the Etruscan layout. Also, it's shown on the coast in that series, near the ocean. And Rome is not located there, near the ocean, but the Etruscan cities were located there, which is where they would export and import goods from. Here are examples of Etruscan architecture and temples. And the Pantheon in Rome is Etruscan even. Here's an Etruscan temple. Notice the statues on the roof, specifically Apollo there at the top with his horses. And this is mimicked in many opera houses. The Palais Garnier in Paris, which is the most famous one, has Apollo on the top. The Theater Massimo in Italy has Apollo on the top. And Theater Politima in Sicily looks exactly like that Etruscan temple with Apollo and the 4 horses on the top. See that? And in fact, almost all opera houses have Apollo on the roof. So in the Bible it says they had a king over them, the angel of the bottomless pit. In the Hebrew tongue his name was Abaddon, but in Greek it was Apollyon. And in fact, if you look up just regular theaters named after Apollo, you're going to find a lot of them. Tons. This is an Etruscan statue of Apollo. Notice the heart with the swirl at the bottom. That symbol is also an occult symbol that I've covered in other videos. It was featured in the Wolfman movie and the Avalon video. It was actually on the cover of a book someone sent me with ancient symbols, and it originated with the Etruscans. Now let's look at the Twilight vampire series reference to Etruscans. The Twilight Saga incorporates Etruscan mythology and history, particularly with the Volturi vampire clan. The Volturi are based on the town of Volterra, Italy, and this is it, and it has a rich Etruscan history. The city walls were built during the Etruscan period, and Volterra became one of the 12 important Etruscan city-states that we talked about earlier. Volterra is an ancient Etruscan city-state with a vast necropolis. The site is believed to have been continuously inhabited as a city since 800 BC. It's one of the 12 cities of the Etruscan League, but allied to Rome in the 3rd century BC and became a municipality of Rome, of ancient Rome nobility. When the Republic of Florence fell in 1530, Volterra came under the control of the Medici family. The Volturi in Twilight series were the oldest coven and leaders of the vampires. The Volturi are the largest and most powerful coven of vampires in the Twilight series, and they are directly related to Volterra. The Volturi's long lifespan and status as vampire royalty, ruling over 3,000 years, are also tied to their supposed Etruscan roots. The Etruscans were known for their association with death, the underworld, and resurrection, which aligns with the Volturi's role as vampire enforcers and their ties to the supernatural. The Etruscans had a pantheon of gods and goddesses, including Arteme, Vetus, Mania, Vath, associated with death, the underworld, and the night. Demons like Charontes, Tolchurcha, and Vanth are also part of their mythology. In the film adaptation of New Moon, the Volturi's city was filmed in Montepulciano, which also has Etruscan tombs. Now Harry Potter. This is an Etruscan tomb with a carving of Cerberus, which is a 3-headed demonic dog. And that same 3-headed dog is also featured in Harry Potter. This is the dog right down here on the bottom left. And here's your 3-headed dog in Harry Potter. In Harry Potter, the names Tarquin and Anthony are suggested to have Etruscan origins. Tarquin is derived from the Roman name Tarquinius, of Etruscan origin, and the name of early Roman kings. Anthony is the English form of the Roman name Antonius, and also of Etruscan origin. And there are probably other Etruscan references in Harry Potter, but I didn't watch it. Some other movie references I found to Etruscans are La Chimera. And remember from my first video about Etruscans, they had that statue of the Chimera. So this one is about English archaeologists reconnecting with his crew of accomplices who are grave robbers who survived by looting Etruscan tombs and fencing the ancient treasures they dig up. The next one is The Dead Are Alive. A photographer on an archaeological expedition digging up Etruscan ruins in Italy begins to suspect that not all the Etruscans buried there are actually dead. The Scorpion with Two Tails. Joan has nightmares of Etruscan sacrifices. She knows the Etruscan language, and her husband Arthur is an archaeologist studying Etruscan tombs. In a nightmare, she foresees her husband's death, and then he's killed with the same way the Etruscans killed and sacrificed their victims. Thanks for listening.